The best part of any super speed series is always that moment where the speedster goes all out and the world around them seems to slow to a crawl. And whether it's Quicksilver, the Flash, or even Metro Man, it is always incredible. But when it comes to the most iconic of these characters from my childhood, it has gotta be Sonic. Which is why I was super excited to see him as a card, because I cannot wait to get this feeling in a game of Magic. Sonic the Hedgehog is a 2/4 Hedgehog warrior for 1, a blue, a red, and a white, and as you might have guessed, he has haste. In fact, Sonic is all about going fast and rewards you for playing other fast cards. Gotta Go Fast is an ability that lets you put a +1/+1 counter on all of your creatures with haste or flash whenever Sonic attacks. And on top of that, if any of those creatures ever take damage while he's on the field, they drop their rings. I mean, they make a treasure token, which lets you make more mana to keep speeding up your game plan. There are plenty of ways to build this little guy, and all of his friends have a ton of cool synergies with him. However, I wanted to make a deck specifically around that super speed moment that we see in the movies. I wanted to go so fast that my opponents seemed to be standing still, and I think I got there with this deck. So, reading his abilities, I noticed the word Flash, and anytime I see that, my go-to creature has always been Venser Shaper Savant. This was one of my favorite cards when I first started getting into Magic, and I've always had a soft spot for him. There's a ton of nostalgia there. And this is kind of where the idea hit me. We are going to build a deck with just about every Flash creature that counters, bounces, or interrupts the opponent's game plan, slowing them down while we build an army of speedsters for Sonic to buff up. One of my favorite blue commanders has always been Barrel, but a problem I've always had with that deck is that when you focus too much on countering through instants and sorceries, it can make you feel super vulnerable to anything that actually reaches the board. But in this Sonic deck, our counters are our board, and they will get bigger with each passing turn. Not only that, but we also get to splash in some red and white in there to round out the edges. Now, I am super happy with this deck, but bear in mind, I try to make decks for fairly low cost, so most of the more expensive options like Snapcaster Mage, Rhystic Study, or Smothering Tithe are things I tend to avoid. But if you like those cards, they are super easy to slot in here. And you can always juice things up as much as you want in your version of this, but if you do make changes, let me know what they are in the comments. I'd love to see them. However, there is going to be a rule to anyone who plays this deck. If you build it, you are legally agreeing to these terms. Anytime that you flash in a card to counter a spell, or just generally screw over your opponent in some way, shape, or form, you have to play the soundbite of Sonic saying, "You're too slow!" If the nonsense in this deck doesn't tilt them into a fit of rage, then that should do it. Anyways, let's get into the list. So first and foremost, we need Sonic to be able to run free and unimpeded, so that he can consistently attack without worrying about him dying. So let's look at some of the protection to keep him safe. Firstly, we have a few cards which make him unblockable. Aqueous Form is an aura that does this while also letting us scry when he attacks. Blitzball Stadium and Rogue's Passage can be tapped with a cost to make him unblockable, and Whisper Silk Cloak also does this while giving him Shroud. It is very important to keep him alive.
We're also going to give him Dragonfire Blade to give him a little bit of a boost, as well as Hexproof from monocolor spells.
But of course, he is still vulnerable to AoE, so we throw in our first flash card, Guardian of Faith,
which we can use to phase out any or all of our creatures.
And then we have cards like Boros Charm, Unbreakable Formation, and Archangel Avacyn, all of which can be used at instant speed to make your board indestructible. Notably, Avacyn also transforms after one of your non-angels die, and when she does this, she hits all other creatures and your opponents for 3 damage. This is actually pretty cool with Sonic, as this will allow him to make treasure tokens for each of your creatures who get hit, as just about all of them in this deck have either flash or haste. I did want to get a few more of these kind of AoE ping effects in the deck. This way we could get a bit more ramp through making more treasure tokens, but ultimately I decided against it. However, if you're interested, things like Fire Magic or Fire Ants are great choices. Anyways, other protection includes Vexilus Praetor, a flash creature that gives Sonic protection from everything, basically making him a mini Progenitus. Plumecreed Escort can flash in to give something hexproof for the turn. The Wandering Rescuer can do this for all of your tapped creatures, and you can also flash in Mizium Meddler to redirect a spell with a single target so that it will target him instead, kind of like a Spellskite from hand. Hydroelectrum Specimen also does this, but has the added benefit of being a double-faced card with a land on the backside. Or if Sonic is going to take a direct bit of damage, you can send in Gata and Luzu to negate that damage and then give them +1/+1 for the amount of damage that they stopped. Now, something pretty cool about this deck is that if you bounce, blink, or copy your flashed creatures, just about all of them will re-trigger their effects as they are enter abilities. And again, this applies to just about every creature in the deck, not just the protection ones, so keep it in mind as we go forward. Cards like Cloud Shift, Ephemeral, and Essence Flux will blink them right away, White Mane Lion can put them back in your hand, and Stunt Double becomes a copy of any creature, all of which are super useful and can re-trigger these effects. So that's how we're going to keep our board safe. Now let's take a look at how we are making the opponents stand still. This next bit is all about our flash creatures which counter opponents' spells in some way or another. Fear of Imposters flashes in, counters a spell, and then lets the controller manifest Dread. Nimble Obstructionist can counter an activated or triggered ability. Spell Queller exiles a spell that costs 4 or less, and then lets the player cast it for free when Spell Queller leaves the field. And there are some goofy combos and interactions with this card if you bounce it at the right time. I'm not smart enough to explain them though, so you can look them up elsewhere. Tishana's Tidebender counters activated or triggered abilities, and if it targets an artifact or a creature, they will lose those abilities for as long as she's on the field. Venser Shaper Savant bounces a spell or permanent back to its owner's hand. Smirking Spelljacker exiles a spell and then lets you cast it for free anytime that she attacks. Super cool card I didn't know existed. Draining Whelk counters a spell and gives +1/+1 counters equal to that spell's cost. Transcendent Dragon exiles a spell and then lets you cast it for free, and Hullbreaker Horror is an absolute bastard that lets you either bounce a spell or a non-land permanent anytime you cast a spell. So let's say they try to Doomblade him, well, you can flash in a creature to counter that spell, and then Hullbreaker will trigger to bounce another of that player's permanents, essentially letting you double dip on what this deck wants to do. With that, we have 9 creatures that counter spells and abilities, but obviously that isn't enough. So we also run normal counterspells as well. Counterspell, Negate, Disruption Protocol, which works really well with Sonic's treasure tokens, Dovin's Veto, Render Silent, and Sublime Epiphany. That rounds us up to 15 countering spells in this deck, all without really influencing our board presence in a negative way. And that might be one of the worst things I've ever done. But I know what you're thinking. I want the opponents to tilt even more. Well, why stop at simply countering their cards? Why not steal their abilities? Aboleth Spawn flashes in with Ward 2 and says whenever an opponent's creature has an enter ability go off, you get a copy of that ability and can choose a new target for free. Malleable Imposter becomes a copy of an opponent's creature but adds on the flying keyword. Crafty Cutpurse says, hey, all those tokens you were about to put on the field are now mine. And another bastard card is Mystic Reflections. No flash, but it is an instant that lets you target a non-legendary creature and turns all creatures who would enter this turn into copies of that target. While this isn't really a counterspell, it kind of counters every creature that they would play this turn and usually means that they're not going to play anything instead. Or the most annoying of these cards, Radiant Performer. This flashes in and takes any spell or ability with a single target and effectively applies overload to it, spreading the effect to all possible targets. This means that any spot removal will become a board wipe. Or if you were to, let's say, throw Aqueous Form on Sonic, it would then apply to every creature on the board. And sure, that means that you can't block your opponents on their turn. But your board is probably huge at this point, so they most likely won't be able to live long enough to do that anyways. And to ensure that we are always big enough, Inexorable Tide lets us proliferate whenever we cast a spell. So basically, when Sonic attacks, we get bigger. When the opponent tries to cast a card, we say no, and then we get bigger. Then, since they didn't get to play anything, Sonic can attack again, and we will continue to get bigger. It is truly a disgusting loop. That said, if they do try to attack you, just flash in Portal Manipulator, a card that lets you redirect any or all of your opponent's attacking creatures to another player, though they can't target themselves. This incentivizes you to go all out so that you can feign leaving yourself open and force them into attacking another player, which could be disastrous for either one of them. Similarly, you can force them to leave themselves wide open with Githzerai Monk, that is a hard name to say. When this card flashes in, it will tap all opponent's creatures, leaving them wide open for you to take them out. Of course, we could also get extra attacks through Full Throttle, a sorcery that gives you 2 extra combat phases and untaps your creatures after they attack that turn. You could also throw in like Aurelia the War Leader, but I ended up cutting her. A great card to add in though if you're interested. Again, we really want to make use of Sonic's attacks to get this Hedgehog rolling. So, Windcrag Siege lets us double his attack triggers. Or you could choose to use this to make goblins with lifelink every turn, and importantly, they also have haste for that turn, which means Sonic can boost them as well. This card is really good for Sonic. While we're also on the topic of doubling though, we had to throw in Dual Caster Mage. I don't think I left in any truly degenerate things to do with him, but this card breaks the game if the wind blows the wrong way, so if you want to add those combos, go ahead. This dude flashes in and copies an instant or sorcery effect, which can be so gross. I tried not to make him too abusable in here, but maybe I missed something. Hopefully I didn't. Of course, going fast and slowing the opponents down mean nothing if you run out of gas, so let's look at our draw cards. Spectral Sailor is a 1/1 with flying that can flash in and allows you to pay 4 to draw a card. It is a terrible rate for draw, but it's an early body that we can have Sonic buff, and if an opponent passes without giving us anything to counter, we can use it to draw instead. Fairy Mastermind is a classic, definitely above what I like to pay for a card, but it lets you draw anytime your opponent draws their second card for a turn. And again, you can pay 4, but this time it lets everyone draw a card instead, which means you should get 2 out of this draw while they all get 1. Sicarian Infiltrator has Flash and Squad for 2, letting you make a copy of them for every 2 extra mana that you want to pay. And each of these bodies will draw you a card when they enter. Thought Sponge flashes in and gets +1/+1 for each card an opponent drew this turn. Then, when they die, you can draw a card equal to how much power they had. Notably, because they have Flash, Sonic also boosts them up as well, which means even if your opponents don't draw a lot, he'll still get value. Then we have one of the most important cards in the deck, Errant and Giada, who let you look at the top card of your deck anytime you want, and then you can play any flash or flying cards that you find there. Which, considering we are playing well over 30 of them, you have pretty good odds. Of course, this does mean that you can counter spells from the top of your deck now, and I'm sure that won't upset anyone. Chart a Course is a 2-mana draw 2, which has you discard a card if you didn't attack this turn. We should be attacking every turn, so that's not really a big drawback. Enduring Curiosity has Flash and lets you draw a card whenever a creature you control hits another player, and when it dies, you get to return it to the board as an enchantment. And finally for this section, Frostcliff Siege is another siege, which like our last one, seems to have been made for Sonic. Choosing Jeskai means that you can draw a card whenever one or more of your creatures hits, which again, we have a ton of evasion, so that should be pretty easy. Or you could choose Teamer, which gives your creatures 1 power, trample, and haste, so if you somehow get a creature without flash or haste on your board, now Sonic can buff them as well. With all of those out of the way, we can get into our kinda standard onboard removal suite for Jeskai. Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshare, Stroke of Midnight, Farewell, and Chaos Warp. And of course, we do get bonus points for using a card with Chaos in the name. If you want extra bonus points, you can try and add in the crystals from Final Fantasy as like Chaos Emeralds, or any cards that show rings or have egg or shadow in their name. Get flavorful. Now, there are a few other removal options which are well suited to this deck specifically. Cathar Commando flashes in and lets you pay 1 mana to sack them to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Wave Goodbye returns each creature without a +1/+1 counter on them to their owner's hand. And notably, your cards should have these counters on them because of Sonic. But if they don't, they almost all have enter effects and flash anyways. So you're going to get benefits from them regardless, and playing them again isn't going to hurt you. And our last removal option is a really neat one that I hadn't seen before. Angel of the Dire Hour is a 7-mana creature who flashes in and then exiles all attacking creatures. I think this is a really cool card. And of course, rounding things out, we have our mana rocks, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Talismans of Creativity and Progress. I don't really think we need the Boros Talisman. There's just not enough red in this deck that we need to really worry about it. It's a bigger focus on getting blue out. As for our lands, do the normal Jeskai land stuff. I trust you, you can do it. Just make sure that you have Rogue's Passage to make Sonic unblockable, Karn's Bastion to proliferate all your +1 counters, and most importantly, Muruganda Raceway so that you can go fast. This might be one of the single most annoying decks I've ever put together. It's full of sticky, difficult to deal with creatures that grow on every turn, an ungodly amount of counterspells and removal, and just a bunch of generally annoying and frustrating mechanics for your opponents to suffer through. In other words, it is everything I've been looking for Commander Night. If you enjoyed this list, remember to leave a like and subscribe. A massive thank you to everyone who supports me over on Patreon. But for now, I am officially out of mana, and I will have to see you all in the next one.